You don't notice the theft at first, because it's not your wallet they take, it's your soul. They don't break into your house. They knock politely at the door of your heart, and you open it. Every time you let them in, their voices fill the room, their needs flood your hours, and slowly, your life stops belonging to you. No one warns you about the danger of being too available. They tell you to be kind, to be there for others. But they forget to mention that constant presence makes you invisible. Carl Jung once wrote, "The soul suffers from not living its own life. And there is no greater way to lose your life than to spend it on everyone but yourself." The energetic cost is silent but catastrophic. Every yes you give when your spirit is screaming no is a theft of vitality. Every late-night reply, every urgent favor, every moment you drop what you love to meet someone else's needs, chips away at the marrow of your being. Here's the paradox. The more you give without limit, the less they value what you give. In economics, abundance decreases value. In relationships, it's no different. Water in the desert is sacred. Water in the flood is ignored. The truth is cruel. They don't stop calling because they care about your rest. They stop calling when they find someone else to take from. The soul begins to rot in this cycle, not from malice, but from the erosion of boundaries. Solitude becomes the only medicine left. Withdrawal becomes the only way to hear your own thoughts. Silence, the only place your name is not being called. Jung understood this deeply. He saw that the soul doesn't heal in the crowd, or in the endless chatter of obligations. It heals in the shadows. It heals when the world no longer has access to you. If you keep letting them drink from your well, don't be surprised when you find it empty, and they've moved on to the next. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to lock the gate. Human beings have always worshipped scarcity. It is wired into the marrow of our instincts. The rare gem, the forbidden fruit, the water hidden in deep wells. These are the things that make the heart beat faster. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this clearly. The value of a thing sometimes lies not in what one attains with it, but in what one pays for it, in what it costs us. The tragedy is this. When you are always there, you cost nothing. And what costs nothing is treated like nothing. You may think your constant presence is proof of love, but to the human mind, familiarity breeds blindness. They stop noticing the fire because it's always lit. They stop tasting the bread because it's always on the table. This is why ancient kings wore crowns of gold and appeared rarely in public. Scarcity breeds mystique. Mystique breeds reverence. When you are too available, you are like sunlight in the Sahara, abundant, endless, unappreciated. They will seek shade, not because the sun has no power, but because its power is too easy to take for granted. Scarcity is not about arrogance. It is about self-respect. It is the quiet refusal to let your worth be diluted by overexposure. Carl Jung believed that the psyche craves balance between the seen and unseen. Your constant availability tilts that balance until you are all seen and never missed. Without absence, there is no longing. Without distance, there is no desire. Think about it. The music you love most is the one that ends before you want it to. The friend you cherish most is the one who vanishes for months, and whose return feels like spring after a bitter winter. Your value is not in how many hours you give, but in how intentionally you give them. Your time is not a public fountain. It is a rare vintage, uncorked only for those who honor its worth. To be scarce is not to abandon. It is to teach the world that your presence is a gift, not an endless resource. And until you learn this truth, you will keep watching them walk past you, looking for something rarer, even though they will never find it. We live in an age where silence is almost extinct, where the hum of notifications has replaced the heartbeat, where connection means seeing someone's face through a glass screen rather than across a table. They call it a connected world, but in truth, It is a world addicted to the illusion of intimacy. You can speak to someone every day and not truly know them. You can have 1,000 friends and still feel the frost of isolation creeping in at night. Carl Jung warned that the crowd is not the cure for loneliness. In fact, it can be its sharpest blade. The more faces we surround ourselves with, the less we hear the whisper of our own soul. You scroll, you tap, you like. And yet each action drains a fraction of your depth. It is not presence, it is performance. It is not connection, it is consumption. The tragedy is subtle. By giving the world constant access to your life, you begin to measure your worth by how much attention you can hold. You trade the sacred stillness of being for the exhausting theater of appearing. Nietzsche would have called it a slow suicide, the kind that feels like entertainment while it kills you. You must understand, true connection is born in absence. It breathes in space. It thrives in mystery. A soul cannot heal when it is constantly broadcasting itself. The same way a wound will not close if you keep touching it for validation. The people who truly care for you do not need constant reminders that you exist. They feel your presence in your absence. They respect your silence because they know that when you do speak, it will matter. To disconnect is not to disappear forever. It is to reclaim the right to appear on your own terms. It is to teach yourself that you are more than your reflection in their eyes. And maybe that's the great lesson of this hyperconnected age, that you do not need to be everywhere to be seen. Sometimes, the ones who vanish are the only ones who are truly remembered. There is a silence so deep it feels like drowning, and yet, it is the first breath your soul has taken in years. At first, solitude feels like exile. You mistake the absence of voices for the absence of worth. You feel the cold of an empty room and think it means you have been abandoned. But here's the truth Jung understood. The self cannot be found while it is surrounded. Your true worth is not visible when it is buried under the noise of others. Solitude is the mirror no one dares to look into, because it shows you the raw, unedited truth of who you are. When no one is watching, no one is asking, no one is taking, it is here that you realize how much of yourself was just a reflection of other people's needs. How many of your dreams were borrowed? How many of your opinions were echoes? In solitude, the performance stops. There are no lines to memorize, no applause to chase. The face you see in the still water is your own, not the mask you wore to survive the day. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." And solitude is how you remember you are an individual at all. The first days in this quiet feel unbearable. You reach for your phone. You think of who you could call. Your body twitches for the dopamine of being needed. But then something shifts. You begin to feel a strange power returning, a self-contained gravity. You no longer orbit around others. They begin to orbit around you. Because worth is not measured in how available you are. It is measured in how anchored you are to yourself. And when you learn to be whole in your own company, you stop chasing people who treat you as a convenience. You begin to attract those who meet you at your level, because they can feel that you will not shrink to fit their hands. Solitude doesn't just reveal your worth, it builds it. And the world can sense when you have something rare that cannot be bought with attention. It is in this space, away from the noise, that your soul begins to remember its original shape. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors, and you choose who holds the key. The tragedy of the endlessly available soul is that it leaves the door unlocked, day and night, for anyone who wishes to enter. Carl Jung taught that the psyche requires a protected space, in which the self can grow without intrusion. Without boundaries, your inner life is trampled by the constant footsteps of other people's desires. Mystique is born from this protection. It is the shimmer in the air when people realize they do not have unlimited access to you. It is the space between encounters that deepens the hunger to know you. In a world of overexposure, mystique is not an accident. It is a discipline. You choose when to speak, when to appear, and when to vanish into the silence of your own making. Detachment is its sister. It is not coldness, but clarity, the ability to see without clinging, to care without losing yourself in someone else's storm. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who cannot command himself will always be a servant." And boundaries are self-command made visible. People respect what they cannot control. They may resent it, but they cannot ignore it. When you stop bending to every demand, the world senses the steel in your spine. Detachment also frees you from the emotional roller coaster of constant reaction. You stop living in response to other people's moods and start living according to your own compass. This is where mystique becomes power. You are no longer predictable, no longer a constant fixture. Your presence becomes an event, and events are remembered. But here's the danger. Without boundaries, mystique collapses into exhaustion. Without detachment, scarcity turns into manipulation. The balance is in creating space out of self-respect, not out of fear or revenge. You do not vanish to punish. You vanish to preserve. You do not withhold to control. You withhold to protect what is sacred. And the moment you understand this, you become untouchable in a way the world cannot explain. Only feel. Every time you say yes when your soul aches to say no, a fragment of you disappears into the shadows. Carl Jung called these lost fragments the shadow self, the parts of your personality you exile in order to be loved, accepted, or needed. Over time, the shadow becomes a graveyard of your authenticity. When you live to please others, you start burying entire pieces of yourself alive. Your anger, your boundaries, your desires, even your joy, if it threatens to displease the crowd. Shadow work is the excavation of this graveyard. It is the willingness to dig through the soil of your compromises, to unearth the bones of who you used to be. But here's the dark truth. The shadow doesn't come back politely. It returns with claws, demanding that you acknowledge the years it was silenced. It will show you the people you kept around who never deserved you. It will show you the lies you told yourself to survive. This is why most people avoid the work, because the shadow speaks in a voice they've been trained to fear. Yet Jung insisted that integration of the shadow is not a luxury, it is a necessity for wholeness. Until you reclaim the parts of you sacrificed on the altar of people-pleasing, you will never know what it feels like to truly stand in your own power. In solitude, the shadow becomes louder. It sits beside you in the dark and asks the questions you've been avoiding. Who would you be if you stopped living for them? What would you create if no one had to approve of it? Whose voice would fall silent in your mind if you walked away? Shadow work is not about becoming hard or unkind. It is about becoming whole. When you welcome back your shadow, you stop being an edited version of yourself. You become the raw, unfiltered truth. And truth has a presence that needs no validation. And once the shadow stands beside you in the light, you will find that the world treats you differently, because people can sense when you are no longer willing to bleed for their comfort. There comes a point when you realize that the loudest victories are often the most hollow, and the quietest moments are where eternity lives. Withdrawal is not escape. It is a deliberate turning inward, a journey into the chambers of the soul that no crowd can enter. Seneca once wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." And yet, in the modern world, such retreat is seen as laziness, weakness, or defeat. But there is a sacred defiance in disappearing. When you step away from the endless cycle of demands and distractions, you reclaim the throne within yourself. You remember that your energy is not a public commodity, but a sacred flame. Withdrawal strips away the false urgencies. The phone stops buzzing. The noise fades, and suddenly, you can hear something you forgot existed. Your own heartbeat, steady and unbent. This is not the kind of silence that crushes. It is the silence that nourishes. The kind that reminds you that you existed before their approval, and will exist long after their attention has shifted elsewhere. Gurdjieff taught that without conscious inner work, a person lives like a machine, reacting, performing, never truly awake. Withdrawal is the first act of rebellion against that sleep. It is where you begin to live deliberately, instead of merely existing on autopilot. The spiritual power of withdrawal lies in what it reveals, that so much of what you chase is meaningless without inner stillness, that the applause you thought you needed was only keeping you from hearing your soul's instructions. In this retreat, you begin to understand that you are not here to be endlessly available, to be endlessly consumed. You are here to carry something sacred within you, and sacred things are never left out in the open. When you emerge from such withdrawal, you carry a gravity that others cannot explain. They will sense something unshakable in you, a presence forged in silence, tempered in solitude, and untouched by the noise they live in. Because the soul that has been alone with itself becomes a fortress that no chaos can breach. Silence is not empty. It is full of unspoken power, unseen energy, and untold stories. When you choose silence in a world that screams for your attention, you become a storm the eye of which others fear to enter. Distance is not rejection. It is a shield, a sacred space where your spirit breathes, where your essence deepens, and where your worth crystallizes. People are drawn not to those who are always loudest, but to those whose presence feels like gravity. They feel the weight of your absence and the magnetism of your return. Seneca wrote of the noble soul, "True nobility is being superior to your former self, not in being better than someone else." Silence and distance are the tools to build this nobility. They cultivate a presence that cannot be purchased or forced. It must be earned through self-possession. In a culture addicted to noise, the quiet ones unsettle the order. They expose the shallowness of constant chatter and remind others that true power is not in speaking endlessly, but in speaking with meaning and restraint. This is why people respect those who command their presence, not because they demand it, but because they refuse to be defined by the demands of others. To be truly present is to be fully yourself, unapologetically anchored, calm in the center of the storm, untouched by the chaos swirling beyond your borders. The world will try to pull you back into the noise. It will tell you that your silence is loneliness, your distance is coldness, your presence is absence. But these are lies told by those who fear losing control. Silence, distance, and presence are your invisible armor. They protect the sacred core of your being. And when you wield them with intention, you become untouchable, unforgettable, and ultimately free. To disappear is not to die. It is to become unseen in order to be reborn. In the chaos of ceaseless demands, your soul loses its shape, like a whispered name lost in the roar of a storm. When you vanish from the noise, you begin to hear the music beneath it, the quiet melody of your own essence calling you home. Jung believed that the path to wholeness is paved with retreats into the silence of the self. The soul speaks not in the clamor of crowds, but in the sacred hush of solitude. By stepping back from constant availability, you reclaim your life from the hands of others. You cease to be their convenience and start to be your own covenant. This disappearance is a radical act of love. Love for yourself, love for your hidden depths, love for the sacred fire that burns unseen beneath the surface. It is here, in absence, that you become visible, not to the world's gaze, but to your own. Nietzsche's words echo in the void. Become who you are. This cannot happen while you are drowning in the demands of others. The world will try to pull you back, because you have become a riddle they cannot solve. a shadow that refuses to be caught. But you must stay vanished long enough to remember who you were before their voices shaped you. You must disappear to find yourself again. And when you finally return, you will not be the same soul who left. You will carry a darkness that does not consume, but illuminates. You will walk with a silence that speaks louder than any noise ever could. There is a terrible freedom in being forgotten. When the world turns its back, when your name falls silent on their lips, you are left with nothing but yourself. This is the crucible of self, the moment when the masks dissolve, when the crowd disperses, and you stand naked in your own truth. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But becoming yourself often means losing everyone else. To choose yourself is to choose solitude over noise, depth over distraction, authenticity over approval. The world will try to punish you for this. It will brand you as distant, cold, or unloving. It will ask why you no longer answer their calls, why you no longer perform the rituals they expect. But this is the price of your rebirth, because when you finally live by your own terms, you become a force of nature, terrifying, unpredictable, and profoundly free. Nietzsche warned, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." Choosing yourself means embracing the chaos, the dark nights, the silence, the solitude. It means walking away from those who only loved the idea of you, not the raw, unfiltered being you have become. This is not loneliness. It is liberation. When the world no longer recognizes you, you have the rarest gift of all, the chance to become your own universe, your own law, your own home. So lock the door, turn off the lights, step into the darkness with open eyes, because in that darkness, your soul will finally learn to heal. So, what will you choose? To stay lost in the endless noise, a ghost in a crowd that never sees you, or to vanish, to silence the world's demands, and find the fierce, untamed self waiting in the shadows? The soul only heals in solitude, not in crowds, not in constant giving, but in the sacred stillness, where you meet yourself without apology or disguise. This is the dark gift, the terrifying freedom of choosing you, when no one else does. And in that lonely, beautiful darkness, you become whole, you become powerful, you become free.